सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Just spend a couple of moments looking at this picture on your screens. We are letting it freeze on your screen as I set up this episode of Cut the Clutter. This looks like a doodle by somebody who doesn't have much to do in a conference. I do that often. I get bored often enough in conferences, and I also doodle because notepads are routinely kept in conferences. So this looks like the doodle of somebody who got bored, who's getting bored and starts drawing stuff on a notepad sort of aimlessly. So first, I will tell you who's doing it. This is Srettha Thavisin. Srettha Thavisin is the Prime Minister of Thailand. In fact, the new Prime Minister of Thailand. Thailand elected a new government, swore in a new government in September. He's sitting, first of all, I told you who he is. Now let me tell you where he is doing it. He's sitting in Beijing at the third BRI Forum. That is Xi Jinping's dream project, one of his many coming out parties, and his dream project being, all of you know, the Belt and Road Initiative. The third forum, where 23 heads of state, including Vladimir Putin, were present, 150 plus governments were represented, and Xi Jinping would like to believe that they are all part of his BRI world. The highlight of this forum, as we know, was the presence of Vladimir Putin. Besides the big power diplomacy and signaling, however, an important idea came from Srettha Thavisin, the Prime Minister of Thailand. So what is he drawing on this notepad? What is the doodle on his notepad? If you see this doodle carefully, and also the map of Thailand on the other half of the screen, particularly the southern part of Thailand, you will see that the scribble on his notepad, on the map on his notepad, or a rough map on his notepad, is the line across the narrowest part of Thailand, the narrowest part of southern Thailand to be more precise. That is the Isthmus of Kra. Isthmus is a narrow piece of territory like a strip that joins two land masses. To try and understand this, you see the Siliguri corridor. So imagine the Siliguri corridor and imagine also that on both sides of it, right now we have Nepal and Bangladesh. Suppose these were both two large bodies of the sea. In that case, that Siliguri corridor would be called an isthmus in a marine geography sense. This is just for simplicity of understanding. So this is the narrow part of Thailand, the narrowest part of Thailand. Now the important thing is what lies to the west of this part and what lies to the east of this part. What lies to the west of this part, if you look at the entire expanse of the seas, you go across the Andaman Sea to begin with. So you have a few specks. That is the whole range of Andaman and Nicobar Islands, India's territories. And then you have a vast expanse of the Indian Ocean, Bay of Bengal, all of it part of the Indian Ocean system. After that vast expanse of the sea, the entire Indian eastern seaboard is exposed there, right from West Bengal down to the tip of Kanyakumari. So West Bengal, Odisha, Andhra, Tamil Nadu up to Kanyakumari, all of it is exposed. If you look east from here instead, there is the Gulf of Thailand. The Gulf of Thailand is quite small and narrow, just about 600 kilometers. I think at its deepest about 58 meters, 60 meters. This is a kind of extension or inlet, a very large one, an inlet from the South China Sea, which is all a part of the Pacific Ocean system. So what you have to the west is Indo, and to the east you have the Pacific. Between these two, between Indo and the Pacific, lies this narrow belt of Thai territory, which at its narrowest is about 50 kilometers only. That is the Isthmus of Kra. Now, immediately, you would think that, oh, if this is the situation, why didn't someone think of maybe building the equivalent of a Suez Canal or a Panama Canal there? Because that will cut a lot of travel time and save about 1,200 kilometers for ships going west to the east and east to the west. Because right now, the shipping that goes from the west to the east, shipping from India, the Middle East, Europe, to China, and it has to take a circuitous route that comes around the Andaman Sea, then gets into the Strait of Malacca. The Strait of Malacca is one of the most significant strategic choke points in the world. India could dominate the mouth of the narrow Strait of Malacca because the last Indian island in the Nicobar system is not that far from where the strait begins. And then you have Indonesia. Everybody has some grievance or the other with China. There's Indonesia. The Americans also play their own games there. But 40% of global trade goes through Malacca Strait, and 80% of China's energy comes also from Malacca Strait. Also, it gives the port of Singapore and Malaysia their importance. So what if you were able to build a Suez Canal or Panama Canal equivalent in this Isthmus of Kra? So first of all, would you build such a thing today in the 21st century? If you could cut this 1200 kilometers of extra voyage out and maybe save anything between 2 to 4 days of shipping time. Now, a canal is an idea that has been there for a long time, for more than 350 years. And I will take you back to that in just a few minutes. For now, however, what the Thai Prime Minister is sketching is a relatively newer idea. Again, it's not very new. It's been around for some time, but it's a relatively newer idea. This has been in the air, it's been considered, it's been rejected in the past, mostly because of cost. That everybody said, this costs so much money, who can afford to spend that kind of money? Thavisin has now offered this idea at BRI, hoping that the Chinese will fund it. This is the idea to build a road rail system, maybe 100 to 110 kilometers on top of this land, a humongous infrastructure project. And then 2 ports, one on either side, which means shipping comes from the Chinese side to the through the South China Sea, offloads at the Thai port on the eastern side. Those containers are then loaded up on a train or a bunch of trucks, convoys of trucks, taking them to the western side. And the new port to be built on the western side then takes those goods forward and vice versa. This can cut, as we said earlier, 2 to 4 days of travel time. The new Thai Prime Minister thinks that this project will cost $27.44 billion or 1 trillion Thai baht. I think what he has done is he's taken 1 trillion Thai baht and converted those into dollars. That's why you get the decimal point and 2 points after decimal, $27.44 billion. The Thai baht, by the way, is about 2.3 Indian rupees. So 1 trillion Thai baht is about 2.3 trillion Indian rupees. It will take almost 15 years to build, according to his plan. He thinks it will provide lakhs of jobs, fire up his economy, which is right now growing at 2.8% maybe. His estimate is it will go up to 5.56% growth like that. Thai economy, by the way, in terms of per capita income, etc., is much higher than India. So 5.56% growth on that base will be quite good for them. The question again is, where will the money come from? That question is answered by why and where he's making this proposal. Beijing and expectation that the money will come from China. It raises many possibilities, and some of those things we are talking about today. This project looks formidable, forbidding, and you might say it looks unlikely too. But with 21st century technology, one can do these things quite fast, particularly when the Chinese are doing it. Because in that case, environmental concerns, this is, by the way, a very sensitive environmental zone. But do the Chinese bother about these things? In any case, anybody who protests, you know how the Chinese will deal with them. जो हमसे टकराएगा, चूर हो जाएगा, in that manner. The feasibility of the project is a larger debate, and we have some readings there which I will share with you. There is a reading particularly from Mark Kogan, who's Associate Professor of Peace and Conflict Studies at Kansai Gaidai University in Osaka in Japan, and it's a piece from the Diplomat. I'm sharing it with you. I'm sharing the link with you. You can check it out. He's a skeptic, of course. He doesn't think it's going to work so well, and I will give you his analysis. Please take a look at that. First off, however, we'll see what this project will do or can do, and a port, and what will happen when a port opens up on either side. Each will be capable, when completed, of handling 20 million cargo containers, or what is called 20 million 20-foot equivalent units. In the business of logistics, they have their own acronyms. So TEU is 20-foot equivalent unit. What it means is that the port on either side will be able to handle 20 million cargo containers equivalent to 20-foot size. To that perspective, the port of Shanghai. To understand that perspective, think of the port of Shanghai, the busiest port in the world. In 2019, in the pre-pandemic year, it handled 43 million TEU, 43 20-foot equivalent units of containers. So almost the equivalent of that these two ports will be able to handle once this project is completed. So look at the map and generally we'll identify two places on the map. The port on the western side could be called Ranong. The side facing India, that port could be at Ranong, and on the other side, the eastern side at Chumphon. See, mark those places on the map on your screen. We are looking at the cost of 1 trillion Thai baht or $27.44 billion. So the two seaports will cost 636 billion Thai baht, and the rest will be then ground development and then also the roadways, the highway and the railways. The Thai Prime Minister thinks that he will move his parliament for approval this year in 2023, and approval will come quite easily, he thinks, because Thai politics has its own peculiarities. Once he gets that approval, he will put in motion other processes and start roadshows for fundraising. His expectation is that the Chinese will put up most of this money. Then construction will begin by 2025. His target is that by 2030, the first phase of this project will be over. Now, this is not his original idea. As I told you, the idea has been floating for quite some time. Under his predecessor, that is General Prayut Chan-o-cha, this idea had come in. Now, Thai politics is very complex. It's fascinating, but very complex. In fact, when an earlier upheaval took place, we dedicated a full episode of Clutter to Thai politics, including the role of the royalty. So please check that out. I will share a link with you. In Thailand, why is it that I say it's even more complex and fascinating than Pakistan's politics? Because in Pakistan, you have the army and the political system, the elected governments. In Thailand, you have the army and the political system or elected governments, and you also have the monarchy. They also all work together. The monarchy also provides continuity in Thailand. The Thai monarch is not a nobody. The Thai monarch has quite a bit of power. The current monarch, Emperor Vajiralongkorn, also carries the title of Rama X. As you know, Thailand has this very mixed culture with a very strong Indian influence, although the majority of the people in Thailand are Buddhist, but not all. Therein lies the rub, and I will come to that in just a couple of minutes. Now in Thailand, the emperor has his own power. The Thai royalty is not like British royalty that anybody can make fun of all the time. In fact, if you see what the British media does to their royalty, particularly the British tabloids, if their counterparts in Thailand try to do something like that, all the editors and reporters will be in jail for a very long time. It's a rare emperor in today's world, in the 21st century, who's protected by the law of lèse majesté. I'm not sure I pronounce it right, but best effort. What that means is that if anybody insults the king, the person will be jailed. At various points of time, lots of people have been in jail in Thailand like that for that supposed offense. The Thais take their king very seriously. The king has his powers, the elected government has some powers, and also the army. The generals always have some power. Very often the generals become leaders, they get elected. And similarly, in Thailand, top businessmen have a lot of power and they play a role in politics as well. If you look at today's Prime Minister, Srettha Thavisin, who produced this idea at BRI in Beijing, he himself is real estate tycoon. In fact, he founded and runs the largest real estate company in Thailand. So I suppose he also must know something about construction and infrastructure. This is the incredibly complex and interesting mix of the military, royalty, elected politicians, and in some cases, populists like Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra, whose sister also became Prime Minister, Yingluck Shinawatra, and also generals and top businessmen. In this system, now we have this new government, which has made this very important move in the Isthmus of Kra. But as we saw earlier, the government of General Prayut Chan-o-cha also came up with a similar idea. But it was rejected because it seemed to be too expensive, and in any case, public opinion had it that his government was much too corrupt and they'll make more money than building anything. Before that, Thaksin Shinawatra and his party were in power. Today, Thaksin's party is in power in partnership with another party. The current Prime Minister is from Thaksin Shinawatра's party. Thaksin Shinawatra has also come back from his long exile. When he was in power, important to note that when he was in power, his deputy prime minister, Shavalit Yongchayvud, again a general, had also proposed a similar plan. That plan disappeared with the 2006 coup. By the way, Thailand has a rich history of successful coups. In fact, if you just look at data, in the last 80 years or so, Thailand has the fourth largest number of coups for any country in the world. A precursor of the idea of the road, railway and the two ports is a canal, a kind of Panama Canal, Suez Canal kind of project. And it goes back 350 years, as I told you earlier. The story goes that in 1677 AD, King Narai of Ayutthaya is drawn from Ayodhya, I suppose, as Thailand was called in that period. I told you Thailand has a very strong Indian cultural and religious influence. He had a dream. In 1677, King Narai had a dream of making a canal across this isthmus when the country was called Siam, and he called his experts and engineers who told him it's going to be impossible. So the idea was forgotten. Again, Thai royalty brought it back in 1793 because it was, after all, a famous emperor's dream. And then both the British and the French colonial powers picked it up in the 18th and the 19th centuries. The British, it were, who made a head start. At least they sanctioned a flurry of surveys, 1843, 1849, 1863, 1872. And the French also started their own activities. Why were they doing it? Both had contrary motives. You know that in that period, Britain and France were always at war with each other. They were competing powers in Europe. So the British thought that if they could build this, then they could cut transit time between India and China, and that would make trade a lot more profitable for them. The French, however, thought that if this canal was built, it would really fire up the economy of Saigon in Vietnam, which the French controlled, and it will kill Singapore, which was British. But neither side was able to do it, and this project was forgotten. Again, in the 1970s, this came back. Again, in the 1970s, the canal building project came back, and the Thai government, basically driven by a top businessman, a Thai-Chinese businessman, who funded the study, again looked at the idea. They carried out the study in the early 1970s, funded by the Thai-Chinese businessman. And the study said, you can build a canal in 10 years or maybe 8 years, depending on what technology you use in digging. And they said that you will take a shorter time to build this canal if you can use smaller, controlled nuclear explosions to do the digging. These things can't happen in these days. That time has gone past. But the idea of the canal hasn't quite gone away. The idea of the canal has been alive. It's like one of those bad ideas which keep coming back. And you know what? Never dismiss a bad idea, because bad ideas have a nasty habit of reappearing again and again. If this idea comes back, however, it will come partly because of infrastructure, only partly because of infrastructure and time and money savings. There will be another reason. It may also come back because for the Chinese, it will be strategic hedging. Right now, the Chinese worry that the Malacca Strait can become a choke point for them. So someday the balloon goes up between them and India. India can choke Malacca Strait at its narrow entrance point. India is perfectly capable of doing it, or if any member of the Quad with India does it, or one day Indonesia also joins in, because they also have their troubles with the Chinese. In any case, big powers like to hedge. China is a big power. This is an interesting strategic hedge for China, therefore. If China were to then make this investment, which otherwise looks exaggerated, because today a canal like that, besides devastating the environment, will cost at least $55 billion to begin with. By the time these things are completed, we know costs keep going up. And is it worth spending that kind of money? For the Chinese to make that call, strategic calculations will play the primary role. And this worries India a great deal. Now, the counter argument can be the Chinese only want to secure themselves for energy and for their trade. Why should it worry India? In any case, India has today $130 billion worth of trade with China, and if anything, this will make that trade cheaper. But you know what? Countries always put their strategic interests above their trade or economic interests. If you want to understand Why India worries? Look at the map again and see as you go from Thailand's west coast, there is nothing between Thailand's west coast and all of India's eastern seaboard. First of all, the Andaman-Nicobar chain comes in the way, that's close enough. And then all of India's eastern coast, all of the cities, which is today protected. It is today protected by the sea as much as north of India, north and the east of India are protected by the Himalayas. Now, for the Chinese Navy to create any nuisance for India, they have to come through Malacca, where they can be blocked. They can be blocked, they can be challenged. India is now building a lot of military facilities, naval, air, all kinds in the islands of the Andaman-Nicobar group. But if this canal is built and the Chinese take control of this canal, which is quite plausible. In fact, if anything, if building of a canal like this is not implausible, the Chinese taking over the canal is even less implausible. The Chinese can take control of a canal like that either through forfeiture like Hambantota because the Thais failed to pay the debt, or by force, or by subversion, persuasion, you don't know what. The Chinese have many ways of doing it, and that's why India has always been opposed to the idea of the canal. The canal opens up all of India's sea coast to the Chinese Navy. That would almost be like the Chinese taking over all of Arunachal Pradesh and sitting on the foothills facing Assam. India will never allow that. Never. Initially, I was about to say India will never allow it if India had a way, but India will always find a way. India will never allow it. So that's a strategic threat for India. At the same time, because it's a strategic threat for India, it's a double strategic benefit for China. Will the Chinese make that investment? We don't know. Times are changing. It will be tougher for the Chinese to do it. The other important thing that worries many people in Thailand as well, because if you look at the demographics, earlier we talked of geography, but if you look at the demographics of Thailand, I told you Thailand is mostly Buddhist, but there is a twist. The twist mostly lies in the southern districts of Thailand, the southern provinces of Thailand. That is where the bulk of the Muslim population of Thailand is living. About 5% of Thailand, in fact, Pew Research says 7% of Thailand is Muslim. That's a small minority. That's the twist I was talking about. Because of this minority, a very large number are concentrated in the southern districts of Thailand. That's also very close to the Malay Muslim Peninsula, which has had its insurgencies and Malay Muslim insurgents and weapons. So Thailand worries that if they build a canal like that, this would divide their country at its narrowest on religious and ethnic basis. So Thais also have their strategic apprehensions. India has its strategic fears. China has its strategic benefits and incentives. But everybody also knows it's a humongous ticket on this project. It will cost a lot of money. Everybody also knows it's going to be an environmentally destructive project. Everybody also knows that it's not going to be quite as beneficial as the Suez Canal or say the Panama Canal because they cut weeks of time. This only cuts 2, 3, 4 days. So on purely economic reasoning, it will not be worthwhile. For strategic reasons, if the Chinese want to build it, they will run into a wall, not just from India, but also from India's friends and the Quad. And remember that Thailand is a treaty-bound ally of America.